Greetings in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We want to thank you guys again for tuning out today to our Zoom meeting, where we have a series of meetings that we have with some top guests. Today we have a exciting guest, Richard, who is coming to really chat with us in terms of development and fitness and the mindset of athletes who would be able to go on to do great things. Just a little bit of Richard, who has been in the field a long time. I've been working hard to get Richard, over the years to Trinidad, to have him over there to do some things with the athletes. And it's coming. Richard's a sports scientist. He holds his PhD candidate, entrepreneur, long list professor of faculty. He is a coaching educator in Canada, Ontario, director of sports science with the National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada. And I must say to you, Richard has been there with some of the tops in the area of soccer and training with kids, and he's very dedicated to helping and sharing this information. Richard, I want to thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, and I would turn the floor over to you, Richard.
Well, you're welcome, Anthony, and of course, thank you, so much for inviting me on. I know we've been chatting for a while about putting me online and having me speak to everyone in your audience, and also about coming to Trinidad. I'd love to. I've been there a couple of times, I'll say, with the Canadian women's national team, and I loved it. We had a great time. We were in Trinidad. We were also even in Tobago, if you can believe it. We went there once, and we played an exhibition match in Dwight York Stadium over there. So love to go back, and let's hope that I can sooner than later. And again, thank you everyone who's watching live, and whoever else will be watching maybe the recording after. Hopefully can give you some good, useful and valuable information. I'll speak just a little bit about myself first, and maybe how I got to the point that I am at in my career. So I'm doing a lot of things sort of centered around my the two things in my life that I'm really passionate about, and that is soccer and fitness. And I guess maybe it's not so surprising then, if those are my two passions, that I have a business and a company called Soccer Fitness, and I'll say that how I arrived at where I'm at, it wasn't really like a straight line. I'll give a brief maybe explanation of that. I think might be an interesting story. Is essentially I was a player in university, and while I was in university, I was studying sports science, and I was also coaching at the youth amateur level in Toronto. That's where I'm from, Toronto, Canada. So I was playing, I was studying, sports science, and I was also coaching and doing a little bit of personal training on the side because I was into fitness. So anyway, some of the parents of the kids that I was coaching at the time that knew that I was studying sports science and working as a personal trainer, they just approached me and said, my son needs to run a little faster. My son's not in shape. Can you help him? And again, I was only maybe 21, 22 years old at the time, still in school, and just had a few little part-time jobs. I had nothing really that I was doing for work while I was in school. So I said, sure, and I guess, I don't know, maybe they gave me about 20 or 30 bucks to do it. And all of a sudden I had this little part-time job training soccer players. And then some coaches that saw me on the field working with players. They kind of came up to me afterwards and said, oh, my team's not really fit. Can you help them? Can you work with them after practice or whatever? And I said, sure. And, they might have given me $50 or so. In any case, this little part-time business just kind of, appeared organically out of this work I was doing. So by the time I graduated with my undergraduate degree in kinesiology, I had a little business going. And in Canada, in Toronto anyway, if you do study kinesiology or sports science, there isn't necessarily a direct pathway that you go on. There's many different directions you can go. You can get into teaching, you can get into medical school, you can get into physiotherapy, you can get into coaching too. There's many different things you can do. In any case, I didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I knew I loved soccer and I love fitness, And I had this little part-time business going, so I figured, you know what, let me try to do it full-time. And that's how this company called Soccer Fitness was started. And I know I've probably told this, I know I've told this story online before, but I'll say that, you know, how did I get from there, from that little part-time business to now, because this is over the span of about 15, 16 years. Essentially, once I decided that was going to be my, you know, my career, a fitness coach in soccer, I you know, I looked at all of the different sort of categories that fall within that career of fitness coach in soccer, and you know, how can I excel in all of those different categories? And so I'll give you an example of what those categories were in my head. And this is, you know, I was only about 24 years old. I didn't really, you know, I didn't speak to anybody about this really. This is just what came up in my head. So one category was education, and I figured, you know, I had this degree and a couple of licenses in coaching, but I was just starting. So I figured at some point I wanted to get the highest levels of education possible. So in coaching, you know, that means an A license, and you know, on the academic side, that means a master's degree, a PhD, and eventually even publishing research. So that was a target, an objective of mine, to say, you know, I got to get a PhD and I got to get a national A license. And eventually I did the A license in 2012. Now it's quite a while ago. PhD, I'm working on it. I'm almost done. So, you know, I'm going, you know, on my way to getting there. Another category was sort of from the business side, that I felt like, you know, I like to work on the field and all that, but I also said I need to have a facility. I need to have my own facility where I can, you know, run something centralized and work with people and all that. So that was a target. And you know, a few years after that, I ended up partnering with someone to open my first facility. A few years later, that partnership didn't really work out, so I closed that place down, and then a couple of years after that, then I opened my facility, which I still have now. So we're talking 2010. That facility was opened. It's been 11, 12 years later now, and still have it. We moved into a bigger location, but you know, I had that, and you know, that was another category. And another category, just again as an example, is that I figured, to really be an expert in this career, not only did I need to be you know, have my educational credentials and run a business and train athletes and all that, but I also figured that I needed to be a teacher and an educator. And so I figured, well, there's, you know, there's coach education, so I need to become a coach educator. And so I went through the pathway with Ontario Soccer and Canada Soccer, and eventually even developed my own courses called the Soccer Fitness Trainers course. And that's actually some of the stuff I'm going to chat with everyone about today, is sort of material taken from that course, teaching coaches about physical fitness training, testing, everything to do with sports science, nutrition, monitoring training, and so on. And then eventually that also, you know, in that category of teaching and educating, that also led me to become a college professor and eventually a university professor in kinesiology. And so that's another thing that I'm doing now. And I'll just list one more category, because I think it was something, you know, it's important, and maybe definitely a lot of players and young coaches, you know, maybe are thinking this way too, is I always knew that again, I'm talking at that time, I was only, you know, 22 years old, 23 years old. But at that time, I always knew that you know, in order to really be an expert, I had to also work at the highest levels. So running a business and working with a lot of amateur players was great, but I knew that, you know, to get more credibility, to really be seen as one of the best, that's what I wanted. I had to work with the best athletes in, you know, wherever I was. And so again, I was in Canada, so that meant the Ontario provincial program, and eventually the national teams and different university programs, and then from there, professional clubs, and eventually, you know, maybe going beyond just the environment I was in Canada, but going to other countries to work in the professional environment. And you know, those were goals that I set for myself way back then. And I'm, you know, I'm happy to say that I did, you know, achieve quite a few of those goals. I have spent some time in my career working with the Canadian women's national teams. I've been with Toronto FC with their academy. I've been with many different university programs, male and female teams. I've been with the Ottawa Fury in the USL. And I've also been to Uruguay. I've been overseas. I spent a year living in South America and working with a professional club there. And, you know, when my PhD is done and when things get back to normal, I definitely still have, you know, more ambition to work at the higher level as well. Potentially, really what I'm interested in now is, you know, senior national team, men's or women's, and possibly even, you know, more experience working at the top professional levels in Canada or maybe overseas. So I more or less, you know, I identified that being, you know, a professional soccer fitness coach, you know, an expert sports scientist in soccer was what I wanted to do. I looked at all these different categories that relate to that career, and I figured, you know, what are the things that I need to do in order to excel and to be the best in all of those categories. And I'm honestly still doing that now. Every week, every Sunday night, I make my to-do list for the week, and that list has those categories in it. And I make sure that, you know, what are the little objectives for the week that are going to help me to you know, maintain you know, whatever I've got, to build, to learn, to become better, to develop myself. And anyway, so that's what I'm doing. That's what's worked for me. And you know, hopefully that's something that maybe will help, you know, some of the people that are listening and watching this. So I'll say, you know, with that little introduction out of the way, we can get started just with this little presentation that I've prepared. And again, some of this material is taken directly from the courses that I teach for Ontario Soccer and Canada Soccer. And I know, you know, Anthony, that a lot of your audience, you know, we're talking about players, you know, parents and coaches that are kind of aspiring to get into the collegiate and possibly even to the professional level. So I tried to sort of, you know, formulate this information in that way. Hope that's okay. I've titled, you know, this little presentation, High Performance Training for Aspiring Collegiate Soccer Players. Okay, and this is just a brief overview of what we'll be talking about. There's just two parts to it. Part one is periodization, and that's just a fancy word for planning and monitoring training load. So we'll see, you know, what does that mean? And then part two is about training, and this is the soccer fitness way. So this is more or less my, you know, my own methodology that I've developed over the years and that I use with players that I work with, both at the youth amateur level all the way up to the top levels that I've worked with. So this is these are broad topics. I'm going to, you know, condense this information, so hopefully it doesn't take too long. And I know I'd really love to you know, to have questions and answers and to interact with everybody too. So I'll try not to.
The floor is yours, Richard. The floor is yours. You don't worry about the time. You go ahead, man. You do your
All right. Well, it's sometimes I like to talk a lot about this stuff, so I'll try to be as succinct and articulate as I can then.
Okay.
So we'll start with part one. So periodization, and again, what I said about that word is that, you know, it's a popular word. It's maybe even a buzzword in soccer and in sports and in sports science. It's just a fancy word for planning and monitoring training, and specifically this thing called training load. So that's kind of, you know, hopefully we can demystify that word a little bit. But that's what it's about. It's about planning and monitoring training load. Typically, whenever I'm introducing a topic, I like to start with a famous quote. And this is the one that I like to use when I speak about periodization and when I teach this in my courses, coach education, and even at the university level, I teach a course about periodization. So this is the quote: planning training is not simply a science, it's an art. Okay, and you know, I'll let everybody maybe just think about this. Now, I guess I have to ask Anthony, is anyone able to communicate through the chat, or are we?
Well, what they will be able to do, Richard, they can type up questions to you and as you go along.
Okay.
So we tend to leave it for later on at the ending of your presentation.
Great. Okay. So what I'll just say is maybe if anybody wants to, I'll give you 15, 20 seconds just to say, you know, do you have any idea who's responsible for this quote? Who said this? And this might be difficult for you to guess, but we'll see. If anybody wants to type that in the chat, I'll have a look. I don't think you're going to be able to guess this one. This is oh, here we go. Somebody tried. Messi. Okay, it's a good guess, but no. Anybody else? Cruyff, another great guess. Also no. And as I said, I don't think you'd be able to guess it because it's actually me that said this. I'll tell you that you know, if it's possible, if there's some evidence that turns up that Messi or Johan Cruyff or I don't know who else had a chat there. Carlos, you. Okay, yeah. So if anybody turns up any evidence that somebody used this before, I would say before the year 2014. That's, I know, the first soccer fitness trainers course I ever taught. That's when I used it. So in any case, if there's evidence that someone else used that, before that year, I'll take my name down. I'll put the other picture up, no problem. I think it's probably something that a lot of maybe coaches and coach educators and stuff, it's a concept I think that a lot of people might agree with, and maybe a lot of people may use and share. In any case, what I mean by this, and again, we're speaking from the perspective of planning both physical training and just soccer training in general, is that there are scientific principles. I'm going to speak a little bit about them. There are scientific principles that you have to adhere to or follow when you're planning training, because if you don't, there may be, there may be some mistakes you make. There may be, you may overtrain. You may push yourself too hard and you lead to injury. You may undertrain. That's actually another problem. It's actually a common problem in Canada. A lot of, especially at the amateur level, a lot of players, a lot of coaches are not training hard enough. And that's typically because they're not quite, aligned or following the science enough. But within those scientific principles, there isn't one way, one perfect way, one optimal way in order to plan and deliver training. There are thousands of ways, and that's where the art comes into it. That planning training is based on scientific principles. But it's an art in the sense that coaches and players, can be creative, can put their own, their own spin on things, their own interpretation of how best to apply those scientific principles. So you need structure. You can't have anarchy, right, in training. But within that structure, there's a lot of potential for variation. And I think I would say, this idea, this philosophy, you can take it in training and in soccer, but you can also take it into many other aspects of your life as well. That again, you need some structure, you need some order, you need some discipline, but you cannot just be 100% stuck to a particular way of doing things, because then you don't grow and you don't develop optimally. And that's really, it's very, very true with planning training for soccer. So it's not just a science, it's an art.